Hello there, and welcome to yet another episode of Subsecond. This is Hema, the Enterprise Manager of Team Nautilus. And joining me today are two F1 and schools judges, and they were also a part of the 2019 World Finals Team Tribulus. Please welcome Mukesh and Svedha. Hello, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm good. Yeah.
I'm doing
Svedha,
great as well.
That's great to
how are you
hear.
doing? How's it going for you all?
We're good too. 1 month away from the competition. And yeah, we're great too. But how about you guys? Give me a little intro about yourself. Let's start off with Mukesh.
Sure. So I participated in a couple of UAE national finals. So one was in 2017. So that was the first time that we went to the national finals, and we were the first team from our school as well. So I had this memory, we didn't even have a pit display at that time. So it all started off with like one banner of like chart paper that we printed it out in the morning of the competition. So the competition was at 9 and we printed this out at 6. And we just went with like a bunch of A4 sheets and we stuck it onto the pit display. And we started there, right? We were the first team. It was very small. But it's been a very incredible journey since then. The next year we participated and we brought Svedha and for marketing. And we went to the World Finals after that. We participated in the 2019 World Finals. We were a collaboration team between UAE and Ireland. We were called Team Tribulus. And Svedha gets the credit for the name as well. She will talk to you a little more about that, about our team branding. It's been a very, very incredible journey since then. And I can see that, even you guys are from the same school as us, right? And the F1 club has kicked off really well, and I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, you guys got nominated for the Team Identity Award. So Shweta, talk to me more about the how you came up with the name Tribulus. I mean, you guys got nominated. You clearly did something well there.
Right. So we were a collaboration team with the team from Ireland.
Mhm.
So we came second place in national. So they decided to send us in as a part of another team. So we were representing Ireland as well as UAE in the finals. So while brainstorming for ideas, our main goal was to make sure that both teams get their identity in, and we also want to make sure that both the countries are represented equally, right? So we were thinking of different ideas. I think one of the ideas was where we were talking about famous buildings. I don't remember what it was, but that was one thing. And the main idea was we wanted to incorporate both. So Tribulus is actually the national flower of UAE, Tribulus ominis. And our logo was the shamrock, which is the national symbol of Ireland. So the idea behind Tribulus and that logo was that we're making sure that Ireland and UAE were represented together to our team. And therefore, we were Team Tribulus. I think the judges were perhaps impressed by the fact that, we're bringing in both countries as a collaboration team. And we also made sure to have a consistent color scheme throughout the competition. So I think that also emphasized on our team identity and probably got us nominated.
Yeah, that's a really innovative way. And it makes complete sense why you guys would be nominated out of so many teams. But yeah, that's great. Tribulus is a great name, and now that I hear the identity behind it, it truly has, a lot of meaning also. So you guys participated in 2019 in Abu Dhabi, and of course you were Team UAE. So did that add any advantage in any shape or form?
I think, obviously it's very nice to represent in, your country while taking part in your country, but they're pretty fair. Competition-wise, you're not going to get any additional advantage. But I think it was easy for us in the fact that transport, all of that was cut down. We didn't have as much cost as one would if we had to go to a different country. I think that's the only place we would have had an advantage in, even though we still had to ship in our bid display. That was one of the criteria for some reason. Even if it was only Abu Dhabi, we still had to ship it in, so we still had costs there. But apart from that, I think it's just the good feeling that you're representing your country while playing in your country, hometown, right? But yeah, competition-wise, it's no advantage.
How was the competition there? Like competition days, like what did you guys do there? How did you spend your days there?
Okay.
um, how was the competition there? From the moment, it was leading up to the competition, from the day we check into the hotel or even our commute to the hotel, it was an incredibly stressful one. We were extremely nervous, and we enter this hotel, and we check in and all of that, and then the next day, we have the pit display set up, and then we see the hall. We all step in, and then we see there are like so many teams, so many pit displays, and then we see a lot of really really cool teams. So I think Evolve were there. So Evolve UK were there, Evolve Australia were there. So they were really, really wonderful teams. So it was quite overwhelming, that entire atmosphere on the day it started. And we also had a very, very fun time, setting up our pit display. There was a lot of
No, they were.
uh, yeah, but it was, I think, very, very, I would say, thrilling experience, because until each of the thing happened, you never really knew how it would go. Even if it was like how it started from the pit display, we don't really know if everything is going to come together, or if you're going to have any problems, because there were clearly a lot of teams who had problems, who weren't able to push their pit display in and all of that. And then you move into the verbal presentation, and you may not sure how things are going there. And literally, we were outside the verbal presentation hall, and we were all nervous, like, revising our lines. We had a script prepared out and stuff, and we were all like, trying to motivate each other. And it was a very, very fun and thrilling and exciting and scary experience all at the same time. And the race was a completely different thing. Yeah, if you guys can pull up the footage here, that would be great. But yeah,
I think personally, what I liked most was meeting different teams. So we had people come in from all over the world, right? We made good friends. So the pit displays are all lined up next to each other. So obviously, you end up speaking to teams opposite to you or next to you. So we made quite a lot of friends there. I was close to this Malaysian team. There's also a team from Mexico. No, Mukesh would probably know. So it's very fun to meet these people, learn their culture. They taught me songs in Mexican, and we were singing that. I don't think I probably still have those videos. So that's really fun, and you also get to. It's not just Peter next to you. You can go around, meet different people, ask them about how their school is, how their country is. So that's really fun. It's very diverse place as well. So it's good.
yeah, incredible. You get to meet a lot of people, a lot of different cultures, and at the end of the day, I think it's just all about making those friends and the connections. However, the competition is this is what you're going to take back, after this entire experience.
Yeah, agreed. Now, just listening to this makes me excited for our World Finals, which is in about a month now. And hopefully, we also make moments like such and do well at the World Finals. But also, Shweta, you were the marketing manager, and Mukesh, you have quite a bit of experience when it comes to the enterprise side. And both of you have been judges, so I'm pretty sure you must have looked at enterprise portfolios also. So just in terms of enterprise portfolio, now every team has some or the other content written on their portfolio, of course. But do you think looks matter when it comes to any portfolio?
I think definitely, to be honest, content is definitely important as well. But the thing is, you gotta have your first impression right. So when I open a portfolio and I see it cluttered, I wouldn't want to read further. I would, if I'm judging and I'm opening, I've seen there's probably hundreds of teams there, right? And if I'm judging, I'm at least judging 20 teams. They'll have different streams. A judge might be judging over 20 portfolios. So it gets tiring at a point, right? Because you're reading similar content again and again. So when I open a portfolio, I want it to be something that I want to read. It's difficult to make it new content because obviously it's the same judging criteria for everyone. So it'll be similar in content. But what you can stand out is the way you've structured it. You make it easy for the judge to, mark your portfolio. One tip I've been giving teams right now is the fact that follow the scorecard and make your content in a way that you're following the scorecard's contents. So, for example, if the first thing in the scorecard is, say, project management. So let the first thing in your portfolio be project management. So the judge doesn't have to go, up and down on their score sheet, but rather as they flip the pages, they're marking down on their, sheet. This way, you're not missing out on anything, and it makes it easy for the judge to not miss out on anything. And another thing would be try not to put in too much information. Cover everything, yes, but when you over-explain, it can get a little, I wouldn't say boring, but it's more like reading the same thing again and again will make me not as interested in judging the rest of the portfolio. So keep it concise, make sure you cover all the important points, and stick to the scorecard. That's what I would say.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, make life easier for the judge, and the judge will make life easier for your team as well. What about you, Mukesh? What are your thoughts on this?
Certainly. Adding on to what Svedha said, maybe you could try this as an exercise. So from the perspective of a judge, you barely have 10 minutes to judge the entire portfolio. So you must see, like every content that you fill is the trick is someone going to actually read it? Probably not. So now it's all about, that comes back to your question, Hema. Do looks really matter? Certainly. Looks matters. How you have organized your content, that matters. And what are your headings? And what are the points that you're trying to convey? So in my first look, whatever is for a page, right? So whatever is the most important point, I must be able to glimpse through that, run through that. So how well you bring all of that in the portfolio, that's the most important thing, I would say, adding on to Svedha's point, because at the end of the day, how much ever content you add, as a judge, I'm not going to have the time to read it. So once, you have drafted your portfolio out, maybe you can try it out as an exercise. You can probably give it to someone who's familiar with a little bit with that font and see how they are judging it, where their eyes are going. Maybe that'll help you organize your content more. Because at the end of the day, more or less in the enterprise side, a lot of the teams, will have very, very similar content. If it's project management, there are only so and so ways to where you'd be managing everything. So what that differentiates, a really good team from an average one. So it's just about how you represent things at the end of the day.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, sure.
Just one thing, it's a very good point that Mukesh made about titles. Titles are really, really important in the portfolio because it's based on the titles that they mark your scorecard. Because they need to know where they can mark you under. Even if you have amazing content, they need to know where they can mark you under that, right? And if what you've written in the portfolio cannot be marked, then there's no point in having it written. So keep your titles concise and make sure that makes sense, and it directly, it correlates directly to a scorecard metric. That's pretty important.
Yeah, makes sense, because I've seen I've definitely seen this, that a lot of the teams, they rename a certain title, so those the judges are definitely lost where to look at, and they end up spending way more time on something that's not important, and they miss out on things that are important in your portfolio, or you'd like that to be highlighted. So yeah, completely makes sense. But also, now that you guys have seen the competition from like a judge's perspective and a participant's perspective, what are some things that you see that participants nowadays are missing out on, that you as a judge would like to see in their project elements?
Project elements. I think project evaluation, that was something we also missed out on, and I didn't see that quite in the national finals as well. So project evaluation is a very how do I say it? It's a difficult concept to understand when you're thinking about it. It's not a very, it can mean different things to different teams, right? I think the year we participated in the World Finals, Team Evolve, they had a great project evaluation bit in their portfolio. So what they did was, for each and every page that they had a separate box that said project evaluation and evaluates that page's contents. So in their sense, project evaluation was what they did good, what they could have improved on, what they want to, what they have done. It's just self-evaluation at that point, right? And some teams, they had a separate page for project evaluation. That also works. So this really depends on how you want your portfolio to be done. And but in general, people seem to miss out on this thing. It's very crucial in the scorecard as well. because this shows the judges that you understand what you've done and you know where you're going to improve on, or where what you worked on. So I think this is something that people miss out on and should focus on.
Great.
Yeah, completely agreed. I mean, it is, enterprise judging or just portfolio judging itself is quite vital to the team. In World Finance. As people, as F1 graduates, even we can say, what aspect of the competition do you think is like ignored by teams, or like not given as much as importance as it must be given?
Verbals maybe? Or I would say actually the sponsorship and marketing document as well. There's the tiny document, I think it's for 20 points something. That's also something that people seem to skip out on because they tend to focus more on the portfolio, that document gets overlooked. Or verbals, it's more like they don't look at the scorecard. That's what I would say for verbals, right? Even this time in judging, most of the teams that come in, they have a lot of things to say, yes, but if it's not on the scorecard, I can't give you points. It's good to have something different because it helps judges remember your team, especially when they're deciding awards and everything. But you also have to make sure that you're covering everything in the scorecard. So I would think the sponsorship document, verbals, and I think those two are being overlooked. What about you, Mukesh?
Yeah, verbal certainly. That's something I feel as well. Often it's really good to have a script and read it out, practice it as much as you can before you go and deliver. And as Sveda added, in verbal presentation, again, another point here is a lot of teams, they try to stick to the rules, which is something you definitely have to do. Whatever is there in your scorecard, in your portfolio, verbal presentation, any sort of documentation, that is very important. But at the same time, that you must also remember that, that's what all the other teams are also doing, or at least most of the teams are doing that. So you must also have an element that distinguishes you as a team. That that could be like a wow factor. But there's another set of teams who focus a lot on the wow factor. So as a judge, I can remember, wow, so they did this, they have their own innovation, they built their own machine for doing this, etc. But if it's not there in the scorecard, I'm not gonna, grade that for you. So finding the right balance between okay, so how well do I present my innovation and how well I present the content so that the judge can score? It's a combination of both, right? So I think this is something that applies to every aspect of the competition that you're focusing on. So I saw this really, really good team, right? They I forgot the name in the World Finals, but they were from Greece, and they had built their own machine to do a lot of stuff. So one of the
I
machines
think the
that they
arrow
built,
racer.
yeah, it was Arrow Race, right? And they built this machine where they have this really high definition camera on the top, and it's surrounded by lights, and you put the car inside, and the camera is going to take a 3D image of that, and you can point like a distance between any 2 points, and it's going to tell you the accurate distance up to like a micrometer. So this is such a cool innovation that they did, but and they had a lot of other machines like that. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure it helped them. But was it a wow factor? Yes, it is. But the thing is, as much as innovation is important, be very cautious about representing what is required in the team, in the portfolio and the verbal presentation, and make sure you have enough space for the innovation. But then most of your space goes into the content that is needed. So it's a more memorable experience for the judge at the end of the day.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. I mean, even this year when we were judging Formula Thara, of course they're younger kids, so they didn't really know about the scorecard, and they had such great USPs. And I really wanted to mark them for that, but they didn't hit anything else on the scorecard. So I was like, and a lot of the teams did this. In fact, they switched the scorecard of the pit display with the verbals. So they presented the pit display information in the verbals. And then I'm like, that's so unfortunate because the previous day I was judging verbals, and I know they hit everything. So they would have gotten a perfect score, but unfortunately, because they mixed it up, the judges, of course, can't mark you for it. So that's pretty unfortunate. But just on the topic of scorecard, um, just as a participant, sometimes the scorecards are so ambiguous, you can't really even interpret it. So, what are your thoughts on participants trying to interpret a scorecard and trying to apply that everywhere?
I think keep it simple, right? Try not to overthink it, right? When you read a sentence, the first thought that hits your head is probably what they're looking for. Um, and always approach other teams because scorecard has been the same for a few years now. You can always approach teams that have participated before and ask them their interpretation of what this was and what they felt was in the or when they spoke judges in the finals, what they thought it was. But yeah, keep it simple. When you read it, the first thing that hits you is probably what it is. Follow that, and I think that's probably the way you can go about it.
Good. Yeah, I feel the same too as well. Just have a chat with the teams who have already done it, and possibly with other judges, and who certainly other judges, because they would have gone through the scorecard and hundreds of other portfolios, so they would certainly have an idea about what that specific aspect is. So that would be a great way to go ahead. So this is for the enterprise side, but technical regulations is a completely different thing. But I think we'll be moving on to that later in the discussion, so we can always have a chat about that.
Yeah. Just for it makes sense because enterprise scorecards don't really change over the years as much. And they pretty much remain pretty similar because I don't think there's a lot of change when it comes to marketing or sponsorships.
Yeah.
But you guys also know that okay, never mind. Drew, go ahead.
And I just question, like, you guys pointed the 2018 Nationals and the 2019 World. So now that we have reached 2023, like it's been over 5 years. So how do you think about the evolution of the competition? What do you think's changed, like, since when you went?
I think national finals wise, there is definitely a lot more teams. That's for sure. The competition is a lot more. Probably because now F1 schools is more integrated. YAS has got its own, YAS in schools program going on. They're promoting it a lot. Our school itself has gotten in so many teams that are going in. This year they had 2 teams going in, which is, I mean, for us it was like it was a big deal, 1 team going in, and now there's so many teams going in. And then there's a lot of schools participating. So national finals wise, there's definitely a lot of improvement in UAE. World finals, not quite sure. I think there's been, obviously every year there will be improvements, but I think it depends on the technical regulation as well and how fast the car can go. I think Mukesh will be able to talk a lot more about that.
Okay. Well, yeah, Svedha had nicely brought out the fact of how F1 in schools have been evolving in the UAE, and it's so really nice to see every year the teams are getting more competitive, and every team is setting a new benchmark, every national champion every year. So that's great. And the general trend that we see overall, I think even you guys, everyone here may agree, is they are taking things like sustainability very seriously. It has always been a main factor from very, very long ago, but they're infusing it into every aspect of the project that you can work on. So that's a very, very interesting point. And now, from even the pit display, I'm not sure what the regulations are like now, but I heard that, you need a very specific dimensions and it must be cardboard or something. There was something about the material.
It's just you can't cargo it.
Right.
Yeah, it
Can't
has to be lightweight.
Lightweight.
Yeah. So sustainability is something they're infusing as much as possible into the project. And I think that's a very, very good thing. It's a very beautiful thing. Because you guys are now, feels too old to say this, but you guys are the next generation forward. So it's very important for us to look into that in every aspect that we and everything that we encounter in our life forward as well. So that's a very nice thing. ESG goals, sustainability, and all of these it's pretty good. In terms of design side, It's very clear that they would want to make the car resemble as much as the F1 car. That's where the regulations are heading as well. It's very interesting. It's also, I understand it's changing the timings and all of that. So you guys are on a clean slate now. So congratulations. So there's no record to beat or something like that. But yeah, I understand. It's very new. A lot of regulations. There are a lot of new things that's coming up, and but yeah, at the end of the day, that's what I think makes F1 in schools, right? It's just constantly evolving regulations that keeps you also to the toes. So, you're not exactly also backed by the experience of the previous teams, but there are new challenges for you to overcome and figure out. So it's really exciting. I'm really happy with what what Nelson and his team are doing right now with the competition every year.
Yeah, and it's important. I mean, there are changes because then the competition just becomes monotone and it becomes monotonous after a while. And then it just teams after teams will keep getting better and better, and then you never know where that'll go.
You can't keep asking all the questions. Let us ask some questions too. Okay, so Mukesh, there are some teams which have like race time simulation. So like it's software which gives an approximation on your car track time. And how accurate do you think it will be? And do you think it's worth spending so much time in making the program itself?
To be honest, I think it's shit. I don't really believe in simulating race time because I understand something like that may happen in another competition or maybe in Formula One where it's in a much bigger scale. But for the kind of competition that we have and there are so many factors, right? If you run the car twice, are you getting the same timing? Certainly not. So I don't really know if it's advisable at this point of time to spend time into developing a software because you may get an very approximate number or range, but for that you might as well test the car and see how it performs because there's a lot of factors that can decide the race time, and it's a very random order. So if your car is really really good, it's going to perform within a certain range, and then but it doesn't really mean that what your simulation shows that would be happening. It is, even if there's the small, after the first run or something, you have a very small misalignment with the wheel or in the way you assemble the car, that's going to affect the results a lot. And there's also track conditions. There's a little bit of like, your initial setup of the car, how well you're aligning it. So there's a lot of factors here. So is it a good idea to invest time into it? Maybe other teams may have done and they may have gotten certain results, but I'm not really sure how well if it's really a good idea to invest time and resources into it.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot of time to code the program itself. And I think that time could be spent on other aspects of engineering, which you would get more benefits of this. And coming to like wheel misalignment and aerodynamics in general, do you think it's more important to have like a proper wheel assembly or just aerodynamics, or like what's the trade-offs?
So this is something that I usually, a very simple formula that I built out and I share with everyone as well. It's firstly your weight of the car. You make sure that it never exceeds, uh, it it never goes below the minimum or it never goes above the minimum. So you're accurate to 0.1 grams, right? So that's the weight, and then that is greater than your assembly. So that's your next importance, and assembly, manufacturing, finish, and all of that. So how stable your car is overall, and then you move into the aerodynamics. So that's the final piece of the puzzle. So it's always advisable to follow something like this because aerodynamic differences it's if you change the angle of a wing, it's not going to be very very significant. That's going to affect the race time. But then if you change the wheel even a little bit, or if your bearing is a little rugged, there's some dust inside it, that's going to affect your race time a lot. And we don't even have to talk about the mass. So we all know how greater the mass is, the slower the performance will be in the end.
Yeah, I mean, aerodynamics doesn't have that much of an effect. The most important thing is keeping your car at 50 grams, and then here comes your wheel assembly. Uh, Coming to wheels, there are between lightweight wheels and like low friction wheels, which would you consider? And like lightweight have lower inertia and low friction, which is it has lower friction with the track surface. But which would be better,
mm, I'm not really sure how we can if I can give a st- you know a very sturdy answer on which of the two would be better in either case. I think it's all about the testing and how the results go after that. Because if it's lightweight, again, there is a factor of how much is this wheel lighter than the other one, or if the other one has a lower friction, how much is it? Like, what's the difference, right? And another fact is, I know there were some teams who want the wheels to roll, and as fast as possible they want the team to pick up speed. So there was this team in one of the national finals. They had a high friction material in the outside of the rim, in the rim of the wheel, the part that's contact with the track. And so they wanted to get their wheels rolling as soon as possible. But then there was another type of team who wanted to you know w- have the wheels with as low as a friction. So I think they used a form of Teflon coating over it. Um, both of them performed really well. So I think it would be a much better idea to see what are the two designs that you have and test it out in a more real world environment.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Because at the end of the day, I mean, depends on how much the wheel is actually rolling. Because like to the first like 3/4 of the track, it could be sliding, and the rest of the track it could be rolling. So, I mean, I think if we unless we test the car, then we can't really exactly tell what type of wheels people need to see. But speaking of manufacturing, manufacturing is really is a crucial aspect in the competition. So what were some crucial manufacturing steps you took to manufacture your car?
Okay. So wha- so definitely we start with the quality of the raw products that we have. That's the first thing that we really look forward to. So we had a more proper timeline that we had set up, and if a certain part, especially that we 3D printed, we printed our own parts, and if it did not meet a certain quality, we made sure that until we get what we wanted, we would do it again. So once we had all of those wheels and assembly and everything together, then the next step is to put everything together, and you do all the sanding that you need. And a very very important thing for that beginner teams usually miss out on is like sanding the car optimally. So you don't want to sand it too much that you create a depression. At the same time, you don't want to sand it too less that it's very bumpy and the parts don't fit in together. So that's something that you know it's a good idea to pay attention to. And once you have sanded and then it's fitting all perfectly, handle it with a lot of care. That's that's I can't emphasize how important it is, because if you even if you apply a little bit of pressure, you may be deforming something. So be very careful with that. And once you put everything together, now is the time for glue. And then you also have to make sure that, the glue doesn't, the layer of thickness that the glue adds, it doesn't affect your design. So you must be very cautious of what type of glue you're using and how much of it is what you're using. And once you have everything stuck together, you can move into a layer of maybe primer and a very thin layer of primer. Sand it off really well because that's going to be important for your finish later. And then you do the painting very carefully. And you add a layer of, clear coat with that. That's how usually teams do. And that's the easiest way to approach. Um, yeah. And then other add-on is like, if you'd want, you can add like certain filler materials. So you can think it's like uh this form of cement. I forgot what it was called. And you just like take that and then you apply it over the car in in all the creases where your parts are joining. So that'll give you like a very smooth finish. So that's a very beautiful touch that you can consider. Um Once this is done and once you finally paint, now comes a more crucial part. And I would say this is the part that really determines the timings of your car, and that's your wheel assembly. So here it's very important because especially if you're using PLA material as an axle and even in your wheels, these are made by layers, right? And these layers can easily wear off. So one issue that we had observed when we were testing was once we insert the bearing into the axle into the bearing, and then when we remove it out, we have a layer of PLA that comes out with it. Or if we keep doing it again, we can see that when the bearing went in for the first time, it was very tight and then became more loose, more loose, more loose, and finally it just comes out, right? So handling that part is very critical. So there are two ways to approach that. One is certainly your quality of print and the material that you're using and the layer properties that you're setting. Then the other thing is just handling it. So you don't want to, insert the axle multiple times. Once you ensure there's a pressure fit, and once you ensure you have a very thin layer of glue, that is if required, if you need, that should be enough to, set things off. Yeah, so once your wheel and everything is set up, just don't, move the car around a lot. Have it in one safe place, probably in a box covered with as much protection as possible. And the next thing that the car has to see is the race. So it must be ready for race. So be very, very cautious of how you handle it. And just remember that even if a tiny particle of dust or, the oil from your hand, it hits the bearing, it does have an effect on your performance because the bearing is very small and it spins at such a high RPM that it would certainly cause an element of, drag inside the bearing itself. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's best to follow an iterative process during manufacturing and assembling the car. And it's about mastering those little things and taking care of those tiny things, which really do have a powerful impact on the car. Um, Also, speaking about cars, I'm sure you have seen the new deceleration system that was implemented with the Hilo.
Uh, I'm not really
So
sure
I'd like to know your thoughts on it.
Um, I haven't had a chance to look at it. If someone can share, that would be great.
Okay, so essentially, the Halo has a notch incorporated into it, and
Yeah.
it is essentially there's like a tension wire across the track, and uh, it stops the car using the Halo's notch.
Okay. Okay. It's very interesting. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but maybe I'll be able to give a better perspective when I see it. Yep.
Yeah. I had this question. So, especially in engineering, like, as teams progress and more companies, like, especially manufacturers get involved, do you think, like, teams that, bring out elements of the competition, like, for example, the race software and, overcomplicate or bring out, like, new things has an advantage over teams that like to keep things simple but ensure that whatever they have is perfect?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's a very good point, Dhruv. I think Svedha can also touch upon this. Not only in terms of design but overall as well. So innovation is very encouraged in Formula One, and they do, want to see you build out new stuff, come up with new software and concepts and all of that. Um, it does, it brings us back to my previous point, right, about the wow factor. Okay, so what's that wow thing that you did? But in general, it is always a good idea to keep things simple. You don't really have to, complicate everything and complicate every single aspect of the competition. Just keep it simple. Um, Make sure, whatever you do there, you do that perfectly. And you can focus on, the extra things that can make you, that you want to do in your, wow list or something. But do it once you have all your fundamentals set up. Once all of that is ready and it has come to a point, and then now you're like, okay, so what's the next thing that I can do, that can make my team stand out? So that's when you go with it. In terms of design, it's it's quite a simple process of CAD. And if you really think about it, it's just CAD. You're designing a car and then you're testing it virtually, and then you make a bunch of iterations, and then you bring it onto the track, and then you test it on the track, and then you do more iterations back in your CAD, and then finally you come back again, and then you test more manufacturing technologies, types, and everything, and you bring the car together. So overall, this flow is very simple. Now, what can we complicate over here? For example, we have an example of a team who did their own simulation in the track. That is a very, very nice thing. And yeah, so you can obviously explore. And I think only at this exploration stage, that brings, these very new revolutionary design and technology and stuff. But it's always a good idea to stay to the fundamentals and think it from a very simpler terms. But even the smallest things, like like a wheel or whatever, see how you can, you know you don't, again, see, there's a difference between complicating a design, and there's a difference between breaking a design down to the fundamentals. Okay, so what exactly is the wheel going through? So it is rotating, it's in contact with the track, just trying to understand all of these fundamentals. And now you see, okay, so the wheel has to be as light as possible. It must have the most simplest of the design, and it must be easy to print and manufacture. It must be a perfect circle. So these are some points that I thought of from the top of my head. So you just have these fundamentals of the wheel noted down. And then you see about how you can reinvent it or how you can improvise on an existing model. So here, again, you're not exactly complicating anything, but you're just putting all your understanding together, and you're trying to innovate something out of it. So I think innovation is something that's always encouraged. And that is something you can always do while you're glued to your fundamentals. But you don't really have to complicate your design and go out of the way before all these things are clear. Yeah.
And in terms of enterprise, so I would say your priority is you keep it simple, you cover your score sheet, right? So you make sure that you're getting maximum points there. And the next step, like Mukesh said, would be your wow factor, which this factor is mainly so that the judges remember you as a team. This helps you stand out. But it doesn't matter if you can stand or not if your basic points are not covered, right? So as a judge, I think you would have also seen this case where multiple teams would have gotten similar points. I'm speaking in terms of verbal presentation, for example, in which case the wow factor will come into play. But the wow factor, again, only comes to play when you have the maximum points that are tied, right? So priority-wise, you make sure that you've gotten as many points as you can. And then you think about anything that might help you stand out. A rough idea would be maybe 90% focus on this, 10% would be to focus on the wow factor. So you've covered all your points, and you have something that, carries you further from just the points. And over complication, I mean, in terms of verbals, you won't really have that sort of thing, I guess. Maybe you come up with, say, new project management software or something like that. You're always welcome to share those, right? And yeah, that's all fine. Just make sure that there's something they can score on, and it's about it. Yeah, keep your priorities right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something every team out there needs to implement and work on. That's setting up fundamentals right, at the same time getting your innovation point also included somehow. So that makes sense. But also, just as an ending question, let me ask this. So there's this factor that no team will ever figure out, I'm pretty sure, and that's sponsorships. Sometimes you're successful, sometimes you're not, and it's a really, really frustrating process for not only the enterprise manager, but for everyone in the team when you're not getting those results. So, how do you think participants should sort of keep their cool through this entire process of sponsorships? And also, how should they really approach this entire process of sponsorships?
So one thing we should understand is we're a student team, right? And when we're approaching sponsors who are corporate sponsors, they're going to weigh the benefits of sponsoring us, right? Um, as a one school's team, there's a lot of advantages we can give, but at the same time, it really depends on the company if they will benefit from it. So you can keep in mind that you cater your benefits according to what the sponsor wants and try to modify it in a way that the sponsor will be able to approach you. But at the same time, if it's something the sponsor, is not very interested in, you can still follow up with other ways. Say, for example, they're not interested in a direct funds. You can try asking them for any kind of sponsorship. If there's any other way they can support us. Maybe they have contacts for other people who can support us. So I think the thing is, you should not be, sad or feel rejected when someone says no, but rather try to find an alternative way where they can help us. They always have some way they can guide us. So if it's not a direct route, try to find an alternative route and always try to look further than just the person that you're looking at. That's something you can always try.
Yeah. What about you, Mukesh?
Adding on to Svedha's point, so in UAE, especially in the market that we are in, so it is quite different from what we see in other countries or other teams doing. So here, most of the companies, a lot of companies here are corporates, and they probably have their head office. Some have it in Dubai, but some have it abroad. But they're all MNCs, so that's the nature of companies here most of the time. And or you have quite small companies. So approaching these companies as such, it may be a challenge because for the how big they are, them benefiting from directly sponsoring F1 in schools may be a little bit of a hassle. May not really be something of their interest at the moment. So here I think it's very important to identify you guys as students. Who are the companies that you can best, who can benefit the most out of you from your community, from supporting you guys. So it could be either universities, institutions, any sort of business that is being driven by a lot of a student based revenue, right? So having a more like approaching on the basis of a target segment, that could be great. So one is like from a student community's perspective. So then you can see, okay, so which are the businesses that would be interested in supporting a student community? And then you think about, okay, so as a student, what are the things that we can do for them that they will benefit? So this is one side of it. So where you're actually generating any sort of ROI to the companies, because that's another important aspect in your competition, I believe. ROI strategy. So this would be a good way, because this is the place where you can directly impact the company and its sales and revenue. So if you have a metric to measure that, if you would be able to add something based on that in your portfolio, I think that would be a great plus. Because ROI is something usually, a lot of teams may have a challenge with, because it's very hard to measure. Like, for example, you have a company's logo on your t-shirt, okay, and hundreds and thousands of people are going to see it. But how do we know that, a person was converted because of the logo that they saw, or because of the branding that we did. So measuring ROI in certain cases may be difficult, but then in these ways, from a student community perspective, you can measure. There is a possibility of that. And then other thing is to approach through like a sense of goodwill, like CSR, or like, using the idea that you're students and you're representing UAE. So more, especially now that you're in the World Finals. So, there'll be companies who are quite passionate about uh, country. And so these are, and usually the people who can sponsor are the small to medium sized companies, and where their owners are based in the Dubai, in the UAE area. So these guys can make a very quick decision. Often what happens is, like, you'd be approaching a manager, and the manager goes to the senior, and then they go to the senior, they go to the director, and then finally someone along this chain rejects, and then it never proceeds through. So it's always a good idea to, if you know someone who's at the top that you can reach out to, they would be in a much better place to make a decision to support you. And in that case, if you're thinking about a corporate perspective, it'll be very tough, because corporates, again, they have a lot of procedures involved before they release any sort of fund. But then if you step down and maybe go for more smaller companies where the owners are more local based, you may have a much better chance over there. So these may not be companies who may directly benefit through sales from sponsoring you. It's definitely going to increase the brand awareness and engagement. But these could be, enthusiasts who just want to support a sense of philanthropy, or they want to support their country, or they just want a much better brand outreach out there. So yeah, there are two ways to look at this. So companies who just want branding, so that could be banks or like any local companies that we talked about. And the other one is companies who get ROI. And one of the easiest ways to measure ROI is to reach too many companies.
And speaking about ROI, ROI is a place where you can actually show your creativity. You don't need to stick to the rules there, because as a student team, there's different ways that you can bring about ROI. It may not be a direct monetary, transaction, but you could be marketing in school, you could be marketing outside, you're marketing in a different country when you go for World Finals. So you need to be able to portray in your portfolio how creatively you brought back ROIs to these companies. And that plays a lot of scores for your portfolio as well. And adding on to what Mukesh said, a mistake that most teams, at least in UAE, do is they approach these high-end companies thinking they'll get a bigger sponsorship from them. But the problem is these bigger companies don't work out because of chain of command, like Mukesh said. So it might be easier to approach multiple mid-level or startups companies than one or two high-end companies. I mean, there are cases it will work out if you have the right contacts, yes. But in general, it's best to approach people who you already know are based in Dubai. And like you said, you are already in the top chain, because they're able to make the decisions. And you can also get a quicker replies, waiting on this one sponsorship while, holding on to the others. So it's easier that way.
Adding on to Svedha, another way to look at this is like the offerings that you'd be making to the sponsor. Often what I've seen teams do is, they would say your logo is going to be on a pit display, your logo is going to be on a car, and it's going to be on my t-shirt. So as a sponsor, at the end of the day, I'll be asking, okay, why should I care? How is it going to benefit me at the end of the day? So, okay, you're saying like hundreds of people are going to see it, and then what, right? Are those audience relevant to me? So there's a lot of questions that will be arising in the mind when they were reading this, because as much as it sounds nice for a lot of teams to, say, yeah, we're going to add your logo here, there, and there. But from a sponsor's mind, you're adding it here, here, and here. But how's it going to help me? And if you can, there are a couple of ways to go about this. One way is like directly addressing to the sponsor how it's going to benefit them. So, for example, we had closely worked with a car company in when we were in Tribalist, and we made this very exclusive document for the company where we had everything about Formula One in school. So how many people will be coming, what's the type of audience, and when F1 in schools is, once we go live in Instagram and all of that, we even showed our website analytics over there. So how many views we are getting and what regions are we getting all of this from. So this is for the sponsor to better understand what's the audience like. So who exactly are they supporting? So who exactly we are and how can we help them? So adding on to more of a factor of thinking about how can we help them? And, and every company would want something different. So Porsche may need something different from like Harriet University, right? So every proposal that you may make, it's going to differ industry-wise and sometimes even company-wise. And to be honest, one thing I think gave us better leads was personalization depending on the company. And it used to be very simple things like, when uh, you know, we made this document, right, for where we show all the data, analytics, and then we even went to the extent of like, showing a picture renders of our t-shirts with the company's logo and our logo and all the logos everywhere and on the car, on the pit display and all of that. So what we did was with all the major companies that we had applied to, we had changed the render of the logo for every page or for everything. So these are some small things. We may consider it small, but then for the company, a sense of personalization would definitely drive more interest to them. So even in your packages, if you can personalize more on like, what the company wants, and then you base your plans off that, that would drive you much better leads. I do understand it would take significantly more time, especially to develop something like that for all the different companies, but it would certainly increase the quality of your leads. So in the crux of what I said, like if you just think about how the company is going to benefit from this and you add relevant content to that, that's going to take you a much longer way than just adding what you can offer.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt, but just one last point. Catering to needs is also important in the World Finance itself. So sponsors, yes, obviously personalization is important. But what I mean by this is, so for example, verbal presentation, right? Judges in the verbals are generally enterprise-based judges and would not have much information on technical side. So when going for the verbals, you do not want to be stressing on too much of the technical innovations because that's not something that the enterprise will be able to effectively understand or judge. You have a technical interview where you'll be able to, express everything that you've done in the car. And in verbals, you want to cater to the judges there. You want to make sure that they understand what you're saying. So that's another mistake I've seen teams here where they come and they spend, if it's an 8-minute presentation, they sometimes spend 3 to 4 minutes on just the car. And there's no points for the car on my score sheet for the verbals, right? You can mention 1 or 2 innovations, that's fine. But if you're going to go on and on about the car, this is not the place to do it. So catering to needs and personalization also works, in different aspects. It's something you can make use of in the World Finals as well.
Yeah, because of course, I mean every company has different policies, and they also segment their market in a different way. So personalizing it according to them and what they want is, as you said, much more effective than just giving them a generalized goals or a company logo and this or that. Because at the end of the day, some of the, like, you don't really get a lot of exposure by company logo and portfolio with display and all of that. So yeah, makes complete sense. But yes, with this, we come to the end of this episode of Sub Second. Thank you so much, Mukesh and Svedha, for joining. We learned so much today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for your time, guys. Thanks for the lovely interview.
Yes, and feel free to reach out to us anytime. That we will, 100%. And I'll see you guys next time in the next episode of Sub Second, 2 weeks after. Bye-bye.